So, Jeff, tell us about your most recent project, One Last Chance.
Yeah, I just finished this up. It's a four-song EP recorded here at Two Cats Music with Ben Travis. He was doing all of the studio engineering and the producing on it with me and collaborating in a lot of the sense. So it was a really good experience. Ben and I got to know each other via Facebook actually. I was posting some videos of myself playing in my bathroom at home, where we all know as musicians the sound is always really good. I was posting those videos on Facebook songwriter pages, and Ben got to interacting with me, and we got to talking about the fact that he had the studio here in Thompson Station, Tennessee, and luckily I was coming up this way on business, so we decided we'd get together and see what would come of it, because I had some new material. Been writing songs actually about 20 years. And I've got quite a backlog, but the newer material that I had been writing here within the last 6 to 9 months was what I was really beginning to get very inspired about, and that's about the time that Ben and I got together, and so we decided we'd start with one of the new songs and just lay down some tracks and see how it went. Ben offered some of his services as far as some session work, which helped me out a lot. And the project is like I said, four of the newer songs that I've written, which I'm kind of hoping is going to turn into a full-length project by the end of this year, or at the latest maybe the early spring of 2020. But these songs are kind of like most of all the stuff that I've written. I have kind of a hard time telling anybody where they came from, because song ideas seem to want to kind of lurk in the shadows and ambush me at very inopportune times. And a lot of the times the inspiration for a song comes out of maybe just a phrase that I've heard, or something that's come up in conversation either between myself and someone, or maybe something I've just overheard somewhere. And then usually the thing about it is those ideas turn into something that is actually an inspiration to me about some certain circumstance or something that's going on in life, and then again some of it is just poetic musings. As I was getting ready for this project, I really only had 1 to 2 songs ready to start recording. So as that recording process started, I was sitting around at any opportune time that I'd have to just sit with me and the guitar and trying to come up with new ideas and keep the creative chain rolling. And one afternoon I was sitting around just playing my guitar, coming up with some riffs, because a lot of the stuff that I do is kind of built around guitar riffs and things. And I, for some reason, was thinking about a conversation that I was having with my dad as a kid, because I had chores and things that I had to do around the house. And it was the winter time, and one of the things that I had to do was go out and make sure that things were taken care of in the time of cold, inclement weather, when things would freeze up and that sort of thing. And I was being the typical lazy preteen and not wanting to go out and do that. And my dad said something about the fact that it was going to get down to around 32 degrees that night. And as I was kind of protesting and not wanting to go do what I was supposed to be doing, I told him, I said, well, you know that 32 is not always freezing. And he didn't see the humor or the logic, either one, in that, which it really wasn't anything other than me trying to get out of something. But as I was sitting there playing that riff that day, I started using that line, and everything just seemed to kind of fall around it. It wasn't necessarily a song that is about that particular instance. It was just inspired by that phrase. And a lot of the things that I write, that's sort of how they come about. Not always, but that's a lot of it. A lot of times it's just an interesting play on words or a phrase, and the way that phrase might turn in the context of a chord progression that I come up with. And so 32 is always freezing. I don't know that my dad knows that he inspired that from him being very unamused from my statement that I made. But yeah, that's where that one came from.
Now, you bring a lot of interesting, unique instruments, especially guitars, into the studio. And I really like the story about this slide guitar over here. If you would want to tell us how that came about.
Yeah. Uh, Honestly, I am, I guess, what I would say a self-professed gearhead. And all my years of playing, which I'm thinking as far as playing in bands and things like that, I guess I've been playing guitar and other stringed instruments since the time I was about probably 12 or 13 years old is about the time that I got started. So it's been quite a while. And over the years, like I said, it's kind of like with people who were into all kinds of different things like classic cars and things like that. Instruments always fascinated me. And I'm kind of a tone junkie. And so on this project, there was a multitude of different instruments that were used. I think one of the vintage instruments that I used was a 1949 J45. That's on at least one of the tracks. And then this guitar that I'm holding, which is made by Waterloo, which is a copy of a Depression era instrument that they have just absolutely nailed, in my opinion. It's a wonderful guitar. But the guitar you're talking about is to my right here. This is a parlor guitar that was made in Chicago, more than likely, I don't know the exact history, but more than likely in the, I would say probably very early 20s. At that time, there were instrument plants in Chicago that made guitars and mandolins and things like that, and they were labeled different labels, even though they were all made in the same factory. And they were sold through department stores like Montgomery Ward and things like that. And this particular guitar is what they call a TB Sterling, and it's Tonk Brothers is actually what TB stands for. But to the history of how this guitar came into my possession was when I got married, my aunt was in charge of doing the reception at the wedding, and as a centerpiece for the table where people came in and signed in as guests, she was looking for something to decorate that table. She had went to a thrift store, and this guitar was there. I think she gave $10 for this guitar, and brought it in and put some ivy and things around it, made it look pretty on the table. And I thought it was so cool that she thought about that, because she knew that, for years that I had been so into music and a musician. And then when the wedding was over, and they were getting everything packed up, she asked me, she said, do you want that guitar? I just bought it as a centerpiece for that table. And I said, sure, why not? At the time, the neck on it was severely bowed. It was so bad you couldn't play it. And so I didn't think a whole lot about it. I knew that it was not something that was just a total piece of junk, but it was an old antique guitar that was in unplayable condition, like most of them are that are of that era. But I took it home and hung it on the wall just as decoration, as kind of an heirloom thing, because of the fact it was used in my wedding. So it was in uncordable position. You couldn't play it like a regular guitar. The strings were so high off the fretboard because of the neck angle. But I did occasionally tune it up in an open tuning and play some slide on it, some dobro type numbers on it, and put it in different types of tunings. And I did use it on a recording project that I did several years ago. It was just featured on one track, and but other than that, it pretty much just hung on the wall with something to look at. So a friend of mine who is a luthier came over one day and saw it, and he asked me the history of it, and I told him, and he was like, that's a pretty decent guitar. He said, do you ever play it? And I said, well, I play slide on it because it's unplayable. And he looked at it and he said, I think I can reset the neck on this and make this to where it's playable. Would you be interested in doing it? And I told him, that as far as I was concerned, that would be fine with me. I didn't want to spend a whole lot of money on it. He told me that he would do it as a project to make sure that he could just, kind of a learning thing for him, and he was interested in it, and said that if it didn't work out and I didn't like it, I wouldn't owe him anything. So he did it. He reset the neck on it, and it was then in playable condition as far as like chording it. And so I enjoyed playing it over the years, but it was still just kind of a wall hanger and kind of an ornament, even though it had gotten back into playable condition by the hands of the buddy of mine that was the luthier. But because of the fact that I had used it on a previous recording project as a slide instrument, I knew that it sounded good for that type of thing. So I went and purchased what they call a riser nut and stuck it on there so that it would actually jack that action back up, and we used it on the title track of this of this project has this guitar, and it kind of features the guitar as the lead instrument in this in the title track, "One Last Chance." And I think it's just interesting that that basically it was purchased, in a thrift store environment for $10, and it's been around longer than any other instrument I've ever owned, because like I said, I'm kind of a gearhead and things come and go instrument wise, but this one has been around. I think the sentimental value kept it around all that time, because there were a few opportunities where somebody probably would have bought it if I would have wanted to, but I think it's going to hang around a little while longer, and I'll probably be using it on some other tracks for the rest of the album that we're going to be looking at trying to finish up between now and the spring. But yeah, it's a cool little guitar. It sounds great on that track, and Ben was able to do some miking and everything like that made it really sound good.
Well, your project sounds great. Got a lot of great, unique songs. Your songwriting style is solid, and your voice and performance, and everybody should check it out. I'll put a link to your project down there where people can go listen and purchase it.
Right.
And
I think it's kind of ironic too that that we chose the title track just because of the fact that we thought it sounded good as well. But then a lot of people that know me, that know that I've been involved in music for a long time, they kind of wondered if there was some kind of continuity there as far as why I chose that, because of the fact that this recording project almost does sort of seem like One Last Chance, because it's kind of gotten me back into to trying to do something with music other than just live performance and going out and entertaining people. And this is an opportunity for me to document some of my original material. And I've been really, I guess you'd say, somewhat surprised that the response to it has been very positive. I think a lot of that comes from the fact of the collaboration with Ben, because his production and his insight and everything has been kind of a key element to the sound that we've gotten. A lot of the people who have heard this, that's one of the main things they talk about, is the fact that how well the production is. And so, like I said, I'm thinking maybe it is going to be that one last chance.